Welcome to 2A Cops, Cops Supporting Gun Rights. My name is Keith. In this episode, we're going to talk about the ATF agent that was shipping AR-15s to Mexico, and the ATF swept it under the carpet, hid it, didn't do anything. Nobody ever charged him, but yet they go after heroes like Larry Vickers. And if you're not following that case, that's a whole video in itself. An American hero is just getting hammered by the ATF, and yet when you have ATF agents actually shipping guns for a second time, this isn't Fast and Furious. This is a whole new fiasco. They're shipping guns to Mexico, yet they go after Larry Vickers, CRS Firearms, for having a picture of a machine gun part, which was supposed machine gun part, and all this other wrongdoing. And they just protect their own and bury it under the carpet. There's supposedly memos out there. We're going to talk about those memos. We're going to talk about some of the other stuff, and we're going to talk about the laws that they violated and how they're brushing it all under the carpet. You need to know about this. People, this is huge, and it should be in the mainstream media, and nobody's talking about it. Before we get started, I want to thank our sponsor, U.S. Law Shield. Now, look, Matt and I are both members of U.S. Law Shield. We have their insurance and their representation because we understand what happens after you're involved in a shooting. You're going to need legal protection, and I really like their plans. Their plans are some of the best that I've ever seen. And Matt actually reached out to them and asked them for sponsorship, and they came through. So we think it's important. And we'll talk more about that in a future video. We're going to talk about what to do after you are involved in a shooting and what you should do. And part of that obviously is going to be insurance, because you're going to need a lot of legal representation. So we're going to talk about what you should do. And ours is a little bit unique because we're cops. We've responded to those shootings before. We know exactly what the investigation is going to entail. We're not lawyers that went to some school and we're giving you some advice. No, we actually responded to those shootings where citizens shot somebody. We're going to give you some advice on what to do from the police side of things. Let's get into it. To just kick things off, a former investigator for the U.S. Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, or BATFE, is accused of smuggling guns into Mexico while employed by the agency in 2017. Now, this is according to a letter sent to ATF's head this week by U.S. Senator Charles Grassley. Now, this is after they went after Larry Vickers for some trumped-up charges, CRS Firearms for having a drawing, and all the other stuff they did with Fast and Furious, okay? Now, the agent he's former agent now, Jose Luis Meneses, a Mexican national who worked as an investigator for ATF at the U.S. consulate in Tijuana. Now, ATF, I got to ask you, why are you having a Mexican national as an investigator for the ATF and then placing him in Tijuana? I'm sorry, but that just are some red flags. He admitted to buying firearm parts online and at a California gun store and trafficking them into Mexico for profit back in 2017, according to a letter and an ATF memo. Heads up, we don't have these. We're getting these from like open press. We would love to see the actual memos. If somebody finds them, put a link into the chat down below, and then we'll put that into the original notes and get that up for you guys. Now, Grassley said in a letter on October 18th, so just a week ago, it cites a 2017 ATF memo and information described as whistleblower disclosures accused the agency of not conducting a full investigation into the matter. Now, Grassley's letter also raised questions about how much information U.S. officials told their Mexican counterparts about the allegations of gun smuggling by the ATF employee, a point that could stoke tensions between the two countries. Now, an embassy official said the embassy found out about suspicious activity, revoked compound access within a day, did an investigation, and fired him within a month. It's terrible that it happened, but this is exactly how it's supposed to work. No, man, that's not how it's supposed to work. He's not supposed to do any of that to begin with. And what do you put him to work in the consulate anyways? This is just stupid. Now, the internal investigation into Meneses began when a firearm parts vendor called the U.S. consulate in Tijuana to report suspicious purchases, and that's according to Grassley's letter. Now, the tip led U.S. officials to interrogate Meneses, who admitted to buying firearm parts in the U.S., smuggling them into Mexico, and handing them off to his brother, who was a Mexican police officer and a former Mexican soldier. Now, again, that's according to the ATF memo. Now, ATF agents from the San Diego office then searched the post office box that Meneses said he used for the purchases, where they found their quote, not mine, assault-style rifle parts, and again, their wording, not mine, high-capacity magazines, and that was in the memo. Those are huge violations of state law. Now, I know that California did away with their, quote, assault weapons law for a week, because thank goodness for the Ninth Circuit Supreme Court justice that keeps squashing all that good stuff. the feds still have to abide by those state laws. If they're going to be arresting you for that stuff, then they should probably abide by it themselves. Now, Meneses used a vehicle with diplomatic plates to avoid being searched at the border while smuggling the firearms. In total, Meneses said he bought enough parts to assemble 8 AR-15 rifles. Now, Meneses was placed on administrative leave, and then he was terminated in April of 2017. Grassley's letter accused the agency of treating the allegations of gun smuggling like an administrative matter, which they did, and questioned whether ATF investigated possible links between Meneses or his associates and Mexican cartels. I'm going to tell you how I found out about this. I found out about this because I do a weekly newsletter for narcotics detectives about drug traffickers in kind of like a generalized update. And in that generalized update, when I get all the news that would affect them, I found this buried. I can tell you this guy probably has some cartel ties because most of the cops there are tied to the cartels. That, you know, it's kind of a long thing to get into. It's a whole nother video, but I have no doubt that this has got cartel ties to it. That shows the ATF is in connection with them, which should all concern us. Now, the ATF memo is detailed summary of Meneses' case prepared by a top ATF official in Mexico at that time and addressed to the then head of Mexico's specialized unit to investigate cases of terrorism and arms trafficking. Now, the memo was written, but it doesn't look like it was ever delivered to Mexican authorities. The ATF on May 9th, 2017, sent an email to a top State Department official in Mexico saying the ATF will not make any notifications to GOM. GOM is the government of Mexico. So they wrote this, but they never told Mexico. Now, we don't have to go into the whole Fast and Furious thing. Again, that's another video that would take a long time, but I want to make some points here. To not charge this guy is blatant. All right. It's an abuse of authority from ATF officials, and they are most definitely 100% burying this under the carpet and hiding it. This is huge, and they should be held down. Let's talk about the actual laws that were violated. Now, you got federal law, California law, and Mexican law. On the federal law side, you got Title 18 USC Section 922A1A. It's unlawful for any person except a licensed dealer to engage in the business of selling firearms. He was selling, now, he did buy them and sell them in Mexico, but ATF would do the same thing to you. That's the charge that they're using for people selling guns to people in Mexico. Got Title 18 USC Section 922D. It's unlawful to sell or dispose of a firearm or ammunition to any person knowing or having a reasonable cause to believe that such a person is prohibited from receiving such a firearm or ammunition. And then lastly, 22 USC Section 2778, it regulates the import and export of defense articles, which would be the AR-15, and services requiring proper authorization. How many people did they come after in America for these sections for doing the exact same thing this ATF agent did, but they didn't even hold their own guy accountable and go after him? Probably because they were embarrassed by it and were trying to bury it and hope it would never come around again. That didn't work out well for them. Now, on the California side, you got California Penal Code Section 27545. It requires all sales, loans, and transfer of firearms in the state to be completed by a licensed firearms dealer under a record of sale DRS process. That one's debatable if they could actually go after him for that, but I think California Department of Justice, Bureau of Firearms, we know that they would probably go after him for that. Lastly, California Penal Code Section 3515, 3600, 3605, they define what constitute, their words, an assault weapon, and regulate the manufacture, sale, distribution, transportation, and importation of assault weapons without a prior permit. Cal DOJ, specifically Bureau of Firearms. You guys are the dirtiest cops I know. Why are you not going after him when you go after Americans in California that are exercising their constitutional right, and you go after them constantly? You know, guys, what I'm saying in this video is going to cause me problems because I was a cop in California for 30 years. So do me a favor while we pause for a minute. Hit like, subscribe, follow, leave a comment. I want to hear what you have to say. Let's the algorithm know that it's important. Other people need to hear it. Lastly, we have Mexican law. Now, I'm not an expert in Mexican law, but possession and carrying of firearms into Mexico by people is a huge felony. Americans go to prison all the time into Mexican prisons for that. I say we extradite Meneses back to Mexico and let them deal with it, and we'll just be done with it. This whole thing is absolutely horrible. And to have it buried, we should be screaming. This should be on every blog, every firearm blog, every YouTube channel. We should all be talking about it because it's BS. Do me a favor. If you like this video, you might like my other channel, Christian Warrior Training. Head on over to Christian Warrior Training. Follow my channel. If you're a Christian and you want news to make your safety team better, I do training tips all the time over there. Every week, head over to christianwarriortraining.com. I also have free training for churches at courses.christianwarriortraining.com. That's all I've got for now. Times are dangerous, my friends. Remember your ABCs. Always be caring.